unfold over the next 5 years. If you'd like to take a look on the social channels, you'll see the 15-minute launch of it yesterday. It was live, I think, at 12:30 yesterday, and it ran, as I say, for 15 minutes or thereabouts. So let's get on to tonight's content. I want to talk about big rocks, and here is the rationale for big rocks. The Health and Safety at Work Act, you'll know, 4 parts, 85 sections, of which 17 sections today have been repealed. And it tells us that it shall be the duty of every employer to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety and welfare at work of all of his employees. Not proposing to dwell too much on that. We got 100% results in the pre-course test. The second area for the rationale for what I'm going to call big rocks this evening is the international standard for occupational health and safety management. I'm sure many of you will know ISO 45001 of 2018. It was reviewed last year, and therefore it's not going to be reviewed again probably till 2026 or 2027. So we've got a very stable standard here. It tells us that when we're planning for occupational health and safety, the organisation shall determine the risk to prevent or reduce undesired effects. And then the final piece I want to bring to your attention is ISO 19011. That is literally right now completing its review. My take on it is there will be few or zero changes, and that too will give us an auditing standard that is stable for 5 more years. It tells us that we should focus on matters that are significant for the auditee. So it's in that context that I want to talk about big rocks. So many of you will be familiar with the risk matrix. You'll see this continuity of how we come to use it. We have the Health and Safety at Work Act that, as you know, tells us we do have to do everything that's reasonable. We've got the management regulations. You'll see my asterisk on this. One of my very personal interests at the moment is the EU repeal bill that's making its way through the Houses. I've put the link on the bottom of my slide here. If I say anything that interests you, that's the place to go for more information on it. But it seems to me that with or without the management of health and safety at work regulations, it is reasonably practicable to carry out a risk assessment of our work activities to determine what's significant, to determine what requires more actions. And many of you'll know the 5 steps approach. It's been around, I think, since 1991. INDG 163 is the number that jumps to my mind. It also forms the backbone of IOSH managing safely. The matrix I've got here is the classic 5x5 with probability along the bottom, with consequence along the top. You'll see in the top left-hand corner my little black bird. If any of you know the work of Nicholas Taleb was talking from 2008 about what he calls black swans. These are risks that have this most interesting category of low probability, but catastrophic consequence. They're the things that make you say, well, we don't need to plan for that because it'll never happen. And if you're lucky, it won't. But when it does, it's great that we're all properly prepared. So I'm going to carry out 20 risk assessments quicker than you've ever carried out 20 risk assessments before. So here we go. I've put them onto the slides here, and you'll see we have 20 hazards. You know, it might represent a typical department, a typical operation. I've looked at the probability of the occurrence of each. I've looked at the severity or the consequence of each, and I've positioned it onto my risk matrix. Now, we'll come later to the idea of the inherent risk and the residual risk. The inherent risk being the risk as it is, without the benefit of controls, prior to the selection of any controls that you might put into place, and then to the residual risk. That's the risk with the benefit of the control frameworks. So what you're going to see next is effectively a soil griddle. I'm sure you can picture one of those things. You take the griddle, you put everything into it, you give it a good shake, and lots of the small stuff falls through. We call that here the small rocks. And then what you see left in the griddle is what we call the big rocks. And you see 5 of them sitting here. These are the selected areas of significant risk that are of interest to the organisation. If I just step back a slide, these are classically those that live in the red zone, those that we predict are most likely and most serious. They might well extend to some of those in the yellow or the amber zone, and very commonly they will include a sample of black swans as well. The premise of the big rocks are you cannot manage everything. We have to be selective. We have to decide where our area of focus should lie and then implement superbly, rather than trying to attend to every single risk, every single pebble, every single granule of soil that sits before us. And at the same time, our audits should focus, you've seen the definition earlier on, our audit should also focus on the big rocks, and if you like, on the black swans too. So what is the framework for attending to all of this? Our big rocks are our significant inherent risks, and you will remember what the Health and Safety at Work Act has to say about that. It says, and I'm going to paraphrase, with or without the requirements of the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations, that we should do everything so far as is reasonably practicable to protect the workers, the employees, that's section 2, as well as people who are not in our employment, and they might be contractors, they might be visitors, they might be some other people, but we should do everything that's reasonably practicable. And over the years, you'll have come across some of these other acronyms here, as low as reasonably practicable, a LARP, as many people call it. The origin of that, if you remember your NEBOSH studies, is Edwards versus the National Coal Board in 1949, and the judge went to great lengths to explain the proportionality between the sacrifice and the benefit, a case that is well worth reading even all of these years later, best part of 75 years later. ALARA is a similar principle, as low as reasonably achievable. That's used for the control of radiation risks, particularly in countries that use US law and US frameworks for their law. So that's how much control we have to give to our big rocks, as much as is reasonable to do so. Something else that we're asked to do, having made this balance, is to think very carefully about the hierarchy of control. Now, if you're old, you'll remember ERIC, and you'll remember either being taught it, or if you're an instructor, you might remember teaching it. But the new frame for the hierarchy of control comes from ISO 45001. It's clause 8.1.2 for anyone that's interested. And I think the simplest way to explain it is to show you a picture of it. If you're old school, you can drop your ERIC letters in there if you will, but you'll remember at the top of the hierarchy, the things that we believe are the most successful, the most effective at controlling risks are to eliminate them in the first place. to substitute the hazardous with the less hazardous being our second choice. Our third choice being engineering controls, followed by administrative controls. And then what we believe to be the least effective is the application of personal protective equipment. Now, I'm going to give you a case study in a moment or two. I'm going to give you 6 minutes in the West Midlands, a story from earlier in my career, and you'll see that we use PPE very effectively. So it's having the right choice at all times, and to demonstrate that we've looked at the hierarchy before making choices anywhere other than at the top couple of bands. Something else we need to do if we're not where we want to be now is to develop an action plan. And an action plan, well, it's set out by the international standard 45001 clause 622. These are the requirements of the standard. We are required to set out exactly what it is we're going to do. It should be specific and measurable and attainable and right as a choice, right insofar as any of the options given to us by the hierarchy of control. And finally, there should be some timeliness with it. So is it urgent, or would it be a month or several months, or will this be okay in a year's time? What resources are responsible? What we're going to need to do it? Is it money or time or people or something else? It's normal for someone to become responsible so that we know who it is we're going to be talked to for a status update, a target date, how will the result be evaluated, and the smart practitioner will try to integrate whatever they've changed into normal processes. I remember the picture of the jelly. Can you picture that thing sitting in the kitchen or on the table wobbling away? If you want to shape and change the shape of the jelly, you can poke your finger into it and the jelly will change shape. But if you remove your finger, the jelly springs back to its old shape. And I fear that some of the action plans I've seen over the years are not sticky enough to freeze the jelly into its new shape. So how do we control significant risks? How do we control big rocks? How do we control black swans? So how should it be applied? And I'm going to start off with the wrong way. So I've been looking at this for a long time now. My doctorate's in this area, and there is fascinating research coming out of Harvard University. Right now, it was published just last year. If anybody wants to see it, I'll share it with them. It seems that the business case for certified management systems is now proven. And there are 3 very bright researchers who've set out on that journey to prove it. It's something I think we've all instinctively believed for a long time. The truth is that there's just not been enough academic research into this, but it is emerging, and it's coming out of Harvard University, which is a great place for it to be coming. So why do we have management systems? I guess it's because we believe there's risks in the business. In fact, if we couldn't find risks in the business, I think any of us should be arguing that we don't need a management system. The management system is a means to an end, not the end in itself. And the frame these days for management systems, many of you will be familiar with the standard that ISO published 11 years ago, Annex SL, that gave us this spine. It calls it the high-level structure for management systems, and it's common to all ISO management system frameworks now. I remember when there was only one. There's something close to 50 now. So whether you're in energy management or environmental management, security, quality, information technology, or occupational health and safety, that PDCA cycle, the Deming wheel, is common. What I say we don't want is this: the notion of a plan for everything. You know, everything that's a hazard, we need a plan for it. Because I've worked with clients, I've worked with employers over nearly 40 years now, and I know that the managers are busy. And if you say we've got just this 100 things or this 200 things we need doing, that you're not popular. But it follows that if you had 100 or a couple of 100 plans, you know, something for every dot on the risk matrix, you might try and do that as well. You might try and check it as well. And you also might act upon it as well. And I'm just not sure that's possible. I just don't believe it works well. And I'm going to see if I can prove that with an example in a case study, as I said, in a moment. The thing that you'll see that's missing here is a critical word. And it's the word we drew from the Act earlier and the international standard earlier, and it is the significance of all of this. And what the research coming out of Harvard, what I believe, this is my special interest, is that if we focus on, for our own organizations, our own sites, our own departments, on the big rocks, the things that really matter, and have a plan for them and implement that plan superbly, and then check that that plan is being implemented well and act upon its findings, it looks something like this instead. Now, it might be that one thing, two things are not enough. It may be that you determine there are several big rocks that need simultaneous plans. And if you can, that's great too. I believe it works better when you do a few things really well than when you try to do many, many things and end up doing them rather less well. I'd like to prove it. This goes back a few years, as I said earlier. We're going to the West Midlands this time. I was going to have this slide animate, but I changed my mind and I thought I'd let you be able to read ahead if you wanted to. But here's the full story of what happened. In 1991, I joined GKN as its safety manager. It's a role I held for 5 years and 1 day. GKN PLC was a multinational automotive, aerospace and defence business with headquarters in the West Midlands. It could trace its origins back to 1759 and the Industrial Revolution. It was the company that had been on the FTSE 100 for longer than any other. It was recently acquired, actually April 2018, by Melrose Industries, and they paid £8.1 billion for it. This case study and my associated recollections predate that acquisition. In the months leading up to my appointment, my own mentor had suggested to me that I needed a proper challenge to test, to validate what were then my emerging thoughts on the operation of PDCA-aligned management systems. Through my contacts then as a chair of a ROSPA health and safety group, I spoke with the Midlands head of the health and safety executive. I've dropped the names I could remember in there. Some of you may remember them too. I asked them who in this part of the world has got a poor health and safety record. Who do you find you're issuing statutory notices to, and who do you have to prosecute? And that inquiry led me to GKN. On my first day, I met my new boss who introduced me to my small team. And one of my team was buried in paperwork, mostly related to civil legal claims brought by our company by our 6,000 workers in the UK. He'd take them from the solicitor's envelope. He would dutifully log them onto a spreadsheet and then post them onwards to our employer's liability insurer. There were hundreds of those claims. and it seemed to me that we settled them all. My first job, thus, was to review the causes of the injuries that led to those claims, to create a profile of them. In a nutshell, 67%, 2/3, of all recorded injuries in the 3 previous years arose from cuts and burns to the fingers, hands, and wrists. That was clearly our big rock. Meanwhile, our purchasing manager had recently been mentioned in dispatches for negotiating a reduction in the purchase price for our protective gloves by 5p to 22p. You might only imagine the build quality and the low level of protection that such gloves might have provided. A view I had then, and which I continue to believe today, is to identify a smaller number of actions and then to implement them superbly, rather than taking too wide a focus and then failing broadly. In my first 3 months at GKN, we had just one health and safety plan to reduce this large quantity of cuts and burns to hands and wrists. I remember feeling that my job and my views on how to apply control in a structured way depended on showing some success here. We reviewed the case law. I've got a note on the side here. It says Hurst versus British Leyland Cars, if anybody wants to look it up, on what constituted so far as reasonably practicable insofar as protecting hands was concerned. Over that 3 months, I organised series after series of glove trials in all of our departments. Gloves for welding, gloves for painting, gloves for handling sheet metal, gloves for injecting wax into fabricated chassis, and so on. Different manufacturers, different materials, sizes, fits, cuffs, and colours. The objective of our trials was to identify and specify the world's best glove for every manual activity. We engaged with as many workers as we could. We let them contribute on what fitted, what was comfortable, what they said protected them best. And when we were done, we launched our glove guide. It was an immediate success. It was rolled out across 20 plants in the UK and subsequently 40 more around the world. Let me explain what I mean by immediate success. The main production site in the UK is in Telford. It actually still is, the Hadley Castle Works. Amongst the site buildings was a fully staffed medical centre led by an occupational health sister with a team of nurses and visiting specialists. 2 months in, Sister telephoned me. She inquired, "Are you trying to put me and my team out of jobs?" She said, "We spend much of our time stitching workers' hands and treating their burns before taking them to the Princess Royal Hospital," she continued. "Suddenly," she said, "we have almost nothing to do." I explained to her that there would be lots of new and more interesting occupational health programs in the future. Well-man, well-woman clinics, occupational monitoring, and other ill health prevention programs. And so our management system implementation progressed. In the months that followed, we went on to select progressively other significant risks, big rocks to focus upon: fire safety, chemical safety, electrical safety, noise, vibration, and so on. I'm certain that the approach we took on focusing on the most important risk and attending to it well was the correct approach. Just before the 5th anniversary of my joining GKN, remember, the most prosecuted company in the United Kingdom, certainly in the Midlands, GKN was awarded a ROSPA Gold Award for health and safety. Over the years, I've been asked a few times, how long does it take to implement an occupational health and safety management system? My usual answer is, with concerted effort, it will take you 5 years. A case study of GKN. I've actually handed over to my publisher today my 8th book. So honestly, I am delighted. I've been writing it every day for 6 months, and that is amongst the case studies in the new book. And it'll be in all good bookshops sometime later on this year. I haven't got anything like a date for it just yet. So I come to my risk matrix here. If we want to know how it is we move an inherent risk to a residual risk, let's plot it in real time based on the case study. So we assessed a significant risk here, and we determined that we must take action upon it. And let's see what our progress looked like. That's where we ended up, where the medical sister told me she got nothing to do anymore, and we were able to apply her skills to new things. How did we get there? Well, I think the first thing we did was something to reduce the likelihood or the probability, which was our new approach, our new strategy, our new culture, our new expectations. The second thing we did, I think probably went somewhere down the page here, and that was simply better gloves. I can tell you that some of our gloves went from 22 pence to over £50. So it was not an insubstantial investment, but I can tell you that the total cost was absolutely and hugely down. We went from hundreds of claims and multiple £1 million insurance premiums to a handful of claims and 5-digit insurance premiums. It absolutely paid for itself many times over. Final activity here, we wanted to make sure that people completely understood that this was a serious initiative and they had a part to fill in. So we topped it off with regular toolbox talks. So we moved in 3 ways from a big rock pretty much to a small rock. And the good question is, how do we know that the system works? Well, critical monitoring of those 3 things is absolutely important. That's ISO 45001 section 9.1 that details and deals with measuring performance. And of course, it brings us inexorably towards the area I also wanted to talk about, which is the same standard section 9.2, which is all about auditing. So firstly, what's audit? Where does a well-run audit fit in to all of this? It's certainly, in my judgment, not walking around in a clipboard looking for issues. You know, it's not looking for problems. That's not an audit. That might well be an inspection, but and we should let the inspectors do their job. Our audits are carried out on behalf of top management, and they're carried out on behalf of all of the interested parties, the stakeholders of the organisation. Increasingly so, these make public websites, and they're read by external third parties like shareholders and bankers and other people like that. So they should be high level and future focused. So let's go back to management. I can't imagine a more complicated time for these people than the last 5 years. You know, what with Brexit and fuel prices and the volatility in markets for energy and raw materials, I can't imagine a more turbulent time, a perfect storm, if you like, in the macro environment. What does that say to us about the adoption of management systems? Does anybody assume that the number of adoptions is going down because management is busy elsewhere? Would you believe it? In the last 12 months, the global adoptions of 45,001 are up 54%. Source the ISO survey. I'll again be happy to share that with anyone that wants to see it. 54% increase. It is a gigantic growth. It's where organizations are heading. It seems to me the ones that are going there are the ones that are performing the best and the ones that thus get the greatest benefit from going there. What do you get as a top management from adopting it? You get feedback on it. So, you know, you'll get statistics every month. Somebody will prepare you the lost time incident rate and the total recordable incident rate and the numbers of this and the numbers of that. You'll absolutely get that, and you'll get communication through the minutes of health and safety committees and some of the other tools that are pretty much mandatory elements of the health and safety management system. Kerry Edwards, your secretary, knows that auditing has been amongst the themes that are of the greatest interest to me. In all years prior to the adoption of ISO 45001, for most organizations, an independent audit, let's drop it in here, was considered good practice, maybe considered best practice. From March 2018, the international adoption of 45,001, an independent audit becomes a mandatory component of the management system. In the simplest terms, you can't be certified without it. If you don't have an audit plan and some audits, you cannot be certified. So who is the recipient of the audit report? Well, a good audit team will tell the line managers. So if the audit has been carried out at your work site, the audit team should carry out a closing meeting and tell the auditee, the most senior manager at that site, what they found. You know, and she will want to know what that is. But let's be clear, where does the audit actually go? It goes over here. It goes as a report on the level of assurance in the effectiveness of the health and safety management, along with any alerts, you know, to things that don't work properly, along with any advice and things that perhaps, you know, might need to change in the future. And it goes across top management's desk. Now, I say to auditors, woe betide you if this report says people were carrying coffee cups without a lid on them, or people were carrying a pencil in the office and they might fall over and be injured. That is not what top management wants to hear. Top management rightly wants to hear about significant impacts on its business objectives. So what does it want to hear about? It wants to hear about the control of big rocks and perhaps black swans, however unlikely they might seem right now. It is the job of an audit team. Let's have a look what the job of an audit team is. You know how it is? It's all too easy to see what you want to see. The old guy on the left there, that's me, glancing in the mirror, and I see a younger version of me. That's what I want to see peering back at me, but only the audit is going to provide the true reflection, independently what's really there. Not paper safety, not files full of jumbled risk assessments, but a meaningful plan for the things that really matter. Is that plan being implemented? Are the key checks on the implementation of that plan revealing where it works and where it does not? Are those checks being used to drive a cycle of continual improvement? In my example, into 67%, 2/3 of all the injuries and 2/3 plus of all the expensive claims that we were settling as a result of our inability to manage the hazard. So what does an audit look like? Well, it's got a number of stages. A brilliant read is either ISO 19011. You can buy that for 100 quid or so. I think my book about auditing is a pretty good read. You can buy that for less than 40 quid. Thanks, Kerry. You can buy that for less than 40 quid. And I'm not here plugging books, but you can read how to carry out a risk-based audit full of case studies and examples, and the stages that an audit team will carry out are a stage where a preparation is carried out. So the audit team are preparing an independent work plan that focuses on the most significant risks and perhaps some black swans as well. They are not auditing everything. I know some people believe, oh, well, we've had auditors in and they didn't say anything, because they believe that an audit that takes maybe a few days or a week or two has checked everything, when in reality, top management is there 365 days and they don't check everything. A risk-based audit is going to focus on a sample of inherent risks. They may coincide with the big rocks selected by the site in the risk assessment. Alternatively, they may be different. That's the essence of the word independence. Of all the words that changed the previous edition of 19,011, and it was 2011, it took them 7 years to add effectively one word, the word independence and risk-based. When the audit team has got their work plan, and there may be 4, 6, 8 key areas of interest, they will very, very intrusively review the management system and verify its application in place. And that finding will be that it works really well or that it does not. The auditor looking at risk area B and C and D will similarly review the management system. What is it that we say we're trying to do here? And then they will very selectively, I say intrusively, verify it to make sure that it works. Again, this is not paper clips and paper cups and nonsense. These are on the most significant risks to the achievement of whatever it is your organization is desperately in these hard times trying to achieve. These things will be of great interest to management. They're going to decide their audit opinion, present at a closing meeting, present in an audit report, and that will help top management to refocus their risk assessment next time going forwards. The plan we had in GKN lasted for just 3 months. That was how long it took us. And as I said to you, after 3 months, we chose something different. We moved our program forward. I think we did fire safety next. It's a long time ago. I don't specially remember, but I think it was fire safety that we picked on next. So I've got about 3 minutes, I think, to conclude. So here we go. 4 points of conclusion. So here's conclusion point 1. Location should focus on plans for just the significant risks. Fewer plans addressed superbly, rather than lots of plans, lots of paper, lots of intention, but low on the delivery. Number 2, the basis for control. This will be now with the management of health and safety at work regulations, or if they're sunsetted on the 31st of December of this year, and they might be, I say it will make no difference, because it is still reasonably practicable to take account of the things that can harm you. It is sensible to use ERIC if that's what you're taught, to use eSEEP in a meaningful way if you subscribe to the idea of the growing rapidly international framework that's 45,001. I say to you, when do we review a risk assessment? I know I talked about INDG 163. You might remember 5 steps. I've picked out step 5 here because it very specifically tells us, step 5, go back and review your assessment. And I say in a meaningful way, that is after 3, maybe 6, maybe 12 months, to either select a new focus, whether it's fire safety or vibration or something else, or if you've not got where you want to be on your action plan, renew the focus on it. That seems a very meaningful way to do that for me. Where do audits fit into all of this? Audits too should focus on big rocks. If you've got audit programs where people are walking around ticking boxes and saying things are okay, like housekeeping and the use of PPE, it seems to me that the investment in that audit is not being fully earned. We want to know what is the residual risk as a result of the control of big rocks, and to raise an assurance with management, if that works well, to alert them to areas of weakness. And if it's us, we are the HSE specialists. You might remember, I'm looking at my notes about what IOSH says in Activate 2028. When employers and public see OSH members, they know they have the best person to enable a safe and healthy working environment. I'm Stephen Asbury. Feel free to contact me. I've put my contacts up onto the screen here. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, click me. I'll be very happy to click you back. If you're interested in any of the stuff I've written, these are my 6 books that are published. My warm recommendation, if you like anything you've heard tonight, is the book on the right, the one with the mostly blue cover and the world map. And you'll find it if you type Asbury Audit into Amazon or any search engine of your choice. South Mids branch, it's been a pleasure talking with you this evening. I understand we might have a few questions, and if we have, I'll be very pleased to have a go at them. If your question doesn't get answered, or you think of one afterwards, you've got my email address there, and I promise to come back to you. I promise to come back to you. Thanks for your time. Good evening.
Right, thank you, Stephen. That was excellent. Thank you so much for that. Very much a potted outline of the whole of this subject matter, really, that you've been involved in. So really appreciate that condensed area, really. Questions then. If you want to pop yourselves on mute and say your question, that's fine. There aren't any questions in the chat at the moment. So if there is anybody that would like to ask a question, then please do. If there are, if you can pop yourselves on mute if there is anything burning issue, anything not new to you on there, just to share your case histories. Nope, doesn't look like there are any. Nope, Stephen, you haven't got anything additional? Any questions that were raised in previous sessions you've done?
No, this is actually a new presentation. This is out for the first time. So South Mids is the first branch to have a listen to this. I understand that you'll get a survey. So, you know, that's also not a form to tick. If there's anything you liked, please say so and I'll keep it in. If there's anything that made you crazy or anything you'd like to see changed, I would absolutely love to hear about it. I've sent a copy of the presentation to Kerry and to your chairman, and I've asked them to share it with you. So I have every expectation that they'll send it to you over the course of the next day or two. I think the only question I'd prepared for myself, if we've got time to ask it and I'll have a go at answering it, is what do you mean by locations? Because certainly the GKN plant in Telford is gigantic. There are thousands, literally, of people that work there, 3 shifts, 363 days a year. Extraordinary amount of activity going on there. So the question I wondered if somebody would ask, in the absence of that, I'll go at answering it, is, what do you mean by a location? Well, I think a location might just be a small company. I think a small company should have a plan for its significant risks. It may be a multi-site operation, and over the years I've worked with quite a few of those. I've worked with companies like Coca-Cola. I looked after 82 bottling plants in 28 countries. And the way that we managed risk in those locations was that we expected each site to have its own plan. So, whilst head office can send down instructions to do this and that, the approach we took was to devolve that to each location. So the plans at a site in Warsaw, Poland, might be very different to the current plans for a site in Athens, Greece. I think it could also be so on a site that's got a much bigger configuration, is for there to be a departmental focus. So I can picture, goods in, a number of processes, and a goods out in a manufacturing sort of facility. I see no reason why the goods in department can't have its own plans for significant risks. And the ones in the, the paint shop or some other department might have completely different plans, different big rocks in their operations. I'm also finally happy to say that could also be true for any work team. It could be a small group of people within a department on a site in a company of some size. I'm laboring the point because something in ISO 45001 that is different to all the other ISO standards is the two words worker participation. So it's not just leadership we need. If we are seriously going to drive the improvements in the style I'm commending here, we need the workers on board as well. And over my career, I've noticed that people tend to be much more supportive of things they've been involved in creating.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. There's a question come through from Philip. Hi, Stephen, great talk. Well, some rocks are physical, such as gloves. What about cultural rocks?
They're whatever they are. I don't draw a distinction. I think in the 1990s, which is the period I was talking about, because I wanted to give you a very meaningful 5-year story, not I was a consultant and I told somebody to do something and then left. The story I told you, I was there for just about every day of it. I lived it, breathed it. I would have been fired if the outcome had been different to the way it ultimately was. As it happened in the end, it led to being headhunted. One of the insurers who noticed the reduced call on the claims budget said, "Who's doing this?" And they headhunted me. And that was my transition from what you might call a classic health and safety manager's job into consultancy. And that was at the end of 1995, early 1996. So Philip's asking a great question here. My big rock then was cuts to burns and hands. The gloves are part of the solution. He's asking about cultural rocks. I say they are whatever they are. I say you choose whichever key issues you are in association with the workers and work to act on them. Do it superbly rather than trying to do lots and lots and lots of different things.
Right, okay, thank you. Right, unless there's further ado, if you could unshare your screen then, thank you, Stephen. And I can then quickly share mine just to finish. And these are the talks now, and I really appreciate your staying with us. It's been really great. We have got this recording of the session today, which will be on our microsite, as well as the presentation slides, and you will have access to that for the branch microsite when you can access those. It takes a little bit of a lead time to get them initiated, but they will be in there. These are the future talks. We have the 26th of April, virtual. These are all virtual at the moment, and we're arranging for face-to-face. We've just had one. And a legal update. Those of you that have been to the branch for many years will know Andrew Litchfield from Gowling, or used to be RAG and Co. So you'll remember him. But he's coming in with Gemma Whitaker as well. So they're doing a combined session on Building Safety Act, the topic of EU law, and that is going to be very topical session, I can assume there, about the changes potentially that may be ahead, and also an update on Grenfell, which Andrew has been dealing with personally anyway on that. So it'll be a very interesting take on all of those areas. So please come to us then. The 10th of May is our AGM, which will be very quick, and we will be having governors from governance department from IOSH for ratifying our committee, who have already been chosen. One or two of you are in the room as it is, and welcome to you. We're looking forward to that, and way ahead for the future of the branch. That'd be wonderful. But we also have a speaker, Neil Sheehan, who is going to be doing a session on really what it is. Has the safety industry really made progress, or has it really made any progress and evolved over the time? You know, we're looking forward as a branch, but has the industry changed and evolved? So that will be really interesting aspect that. And we're welcoming on the 7th of June that we've got Rosa Antonia Carrillo. My slides have just gone. And she's going to be coming to talk to us on the health and safety professional as a leader. She's an author of quite a few books. In fact, Relationship Factor is the one. But this will be quite a different take on the relationships and human factors within the profession. And then 21st of June, a lot of viewers also know Mavis Nye, who works with asbestos, and she has her foundation called the Mavis Nye Foundation, and she's going to talk about working with asbestos within the home area and DIY, as well as working generally. So there's a few areas of really going forward and interesting facets really to do with health and safety in the future. So we really hope you can join us for that session. And yeah, as I said, the first survey will follow. If you wouldn't mind popping in your pointers and anywhere we can sort of improve, and questions and improvements as well, if you can, with the speaker, his session. And also there are the usual networking opportunities. You know, we have our LinkedIn page, web page, and for anyone becoming a mentor or would like to be a mentee, then do get in touch with us at the branch as well, South Midlands at ioshNetworks.com, and that is on our webpage as well. So hope you've enjoyed it, and we really do appreciate you attending and listening to us, and do thank you so much. That's wonderful. So good night from us, and I'll stop the recording now, and thank you so much.